All right, so, this is like one of those, a lot of opinions on it, right? There's a lot of people who think different things about alcohol, isn't there? Differing viewpoints. Some people think it's a sin in its entirety, meaning that if you let alcohol touch your lips, then instantaneous sin, and that was a very popular position for a long time in a lot of churches, I think it was called The Lord, the Liar, and the Liquor Industry. That's a book that was basically telling us that. And there was a very good book, has a lot of insights onto why that's a position. But then there's the other side of the spectrum, which says, you can just get wasted and drunk all the time, and it's not a big deal, totally blasted, whatever, God gave you wine, so why not, right? And then there's the opinion, the moderation opinion. You can drink some alcohol, but when it begins to affect your judgment, then maybe you've gone over the line. I'm going to look at different passages. I'm going to look at some for, some against, and then I'm going to ask you to think about it yourself, about whether it's really something that we should do at all. It's just something to think about. Is it a sin all the time? That's something to just kind of keep in your mind, in the back of your head, think about it. All right, so let's look at some pro wine verses, okay? The one that we are probably instantaneously familiar with is this one, right? This is Jesus turning water into wine after his at a wedding feast. It's Jesus' first miracle. It's substantial, although the miracle is out of sequence, right? He says to his mother, "My time has not yet come," but he goes and he does it anyway, right? And so they fill up some water pots, right? It says, Jesus said to them, "Fill the water pots with water." So they filled them up to the brim, and he said to them, "Draw some out and bring it to the head waiter." So they took it to him, and the head waiter tasted the water, which had become wine, and did not know where it came from. Like, what is this, right? Here we have a wedding feast, everyone's having a good time, and then something horrible happens, the wine runs out, right? So after Jesus intervenes, he turns that water into wine, the head waiter drinks it, and he's like, "What is this?" And then he's like, says, "You save the good stuff till last," right? If you keep reading, he says, "Every man serves the good wine first, and when the people have drunk freely, then he serves the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now." Now this kind of tells us that it is for real wine. It's like straight up wine. It's not grape juice. There's a lot of folks that want it to be grape juice. It's not. It's the word for wine. And if you're serving good wine in the beginning and then the poorer wine later, there's a reason for doing that. Okay, the reason is because you won't notice as much that it's not as good later on. So why are you saving the good stuff till last? Because so we know it's wine, and it makes sense. And people in the ancient world drank wine. They did. And I'm going to get into this more later. Their wine was not the same, though, as our wine is. If you go to the grocery store and you buy a bottle of wine, it's not the same. And if we were looking at, if you're here on Wednesday nights, you'll know that the good, responsible, wise woman mixes her wine ahead of time because she's weakening it. She's adding water to it. It makes it go longer. It's like, why have it from concentrate, right? It makes it go longer, and it makes it much, much less alcoholic, right? So their wine was very weak. It would be like taking a bottle of wine and then a bottle of water and mixing the two together. It'd be much more diluted. You know what I'm saying? So their wine would not be as strong as wine that you buy in the store today, and that's something to think about too. They're not going to get drunk from drinking just a little bit of their wine, especially. But anyway, so let's look at another pro wine verse, right? Ecclesiastes 9:7-9, and this is also, right, Solomon writing this. It says, "Go then, eat your bread in happiness and drink your wine with a cheerful heart. For God has already approved your works. Let your clothes be white all the time." This just seems nice. And I'm like, hey, look, why don't you go wash your clothes? It's okay. You can waste the resources. You imagine if like laundry soap was a thing that you had to think about whether you should use it or not? Well, they had other things, you know, some soap wort, and then they could make soap from potash or whatever. But basically, you know, this is expensive to go and wash your clothes, right? So he says, let your clothes be white all the time. So wash them regularly, and let not oil be lacking on your head. Enjoy life with the woman you love, all the days of your fleeting life, which has been given to you under the sun. For this is your reward in life, and your toil in which you have labored under the sun. So, you know, what's he basically saying here? You know, don't go live in a cave, right? In dirty in the back of a cave and like have a miserable life, and you know, where you got mold growing on your head and stuff. You know, that's not fun. He's like, if you go out and you work and you are living it's okay to live a decent life. You can eat, you can wash your clothes, you can brush your hair, it's all good. You can, you know, massage in a little olive oil, you know, it's all right. Enjoy some of the fruit of your labor, he's saying, you know. So that's basically what the verse is talking about. And wine, of course, is part of that, because they grew wine, they grew grapes, and they made wine from it, and you know, they fermented and it would last longer. So that's just how it worked, right? So these are a couple of verses about how wine's not a big deal. It's just part of life, and that's really how we should look at it in the context of the ancient world. Wine is just part of life. It's a drink like any other drink. Now, did everybody drink wine in the ancient world? Well, most people did, but not everybody did. If you were a Nazirite, then you didn't. If you took the Nazirite vow, you didn't cut your hair, like Samson, right? Remember Samson? He took the Nazirite vow, but the only thing he ever followed was not cutting his hair. He broke all the other things, like touching dead animals and drinking. So he broke all the other rules, except for the hair one. So, you know, there's that going for him. But anyway, so Nazirites did not do it. But anyway, drinking has a bad side too, right? Doesn't it? Drinking is not all sunshine and happy and rainbows and good stuff. And this is why people think that drinking should not be done at all. You shouldn't do it at all, because if this is the same guy that wrote the previous passage in Ecclesiastes, right? Same guy. Here we go. Proverbs 20, verse 1. It says, wine is a mocker, strong drink is a brawler, and whoever is intoxicated by it is not wise. Right? He's telling us about the effects of alcohol. He's telling you what it does. You know, you're going to get into a bar fight, right? And then he's got this one here, this verse, this passage, Proverbs 23, 29 through 25. It's another good one, right? Who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who has contentions? Who has complaining? Who has wounds without cause? Think about it. You wake up from a drunken stupor and you have like bruises on you that you don't know how it happened, right? That's what he's talking about. So who has redness of eyes? Those who linger over wine, those who go to taste mixed wine. See, you can get drunk on watered down wine too, if you drink enough of it. Do not look on the wine when it is red, when it sparkles in the cup, when it goes down smoothly. At the last, it bites like a serpent and stings like a viper. Your eyes will see strange things, and your mind will utter perverse things. And you will be like one who lies down in the middle of the sea, or like one who lies on top of a mast. If you can imagine, you know, on the sea, you know, you're just like, whoa, you know, and that's what we see, like, you know, you see videos of these drunk people like walking into things and falling down all over the place. That's what he's saying. Or like on the top of a mast, you think about that, right? How a boat is rocking like this. Well, if you fix that into a little point way up high, it's like this, right? That's what he's talking about, up high on a mast. And then in verse 35, he says, they struck me, but I did not become ill. They beat me, but I did not know it. And when shall I awake? I will seek another drink. Just sounds horrible. It's like, who's this wine stuff for anyway? Not for me, right? So we got the brawl verse up at the top. Tells us people become mockers and become fighters and brawlers. They get into trouble. They start trouble. People laughing, carousing, getting into fights, you know. And you kind of, you know, see this happen even today. Like, I lived in Rochester, so, you know, we would get like these nightclubs that would open up all the time, and then they would shut down a few months later because you'd see the cops there constantly at night when you're driving by or whatever. They're breaking up some kind of fight or a drug bust or, you know, drunken brawl out on the outside. So they're all shutting down all the time. It's like under new management. Okay, under new management, another drunken brawl shuts down, you know, they get fined by the city and all that kind of stuff. So it leads to bad things, getting drunk, right? And then the next passage, it just basically goes into all the negative side effects about alcohol, what it does to you. You know, you do these things that you shouldn't do. You say things that you shouldn't say. You know, I mean, we all have a filter, and the filter comes off when you drink alcohol. I don't know if you remember Mel Gibson. Yeah, the guy who like was star and directed Braveheart, and then he did The Passion of the Christ, and he was like on cloud nine, wasn't he? He was riding high. He was like #1. You know, everybody thought he was awesome. And then he got blasted at some bar somewhere in some island, I forget where it was. And some guy, some journalist, decided to record that. And he said all these really nasty anti-Semitic things. And then his career just tanked. Done. Nobody wanted to work with him anymore. People refused to work with him. It was all over for him. You know, he had a lot of money that he made already, and he tried to do some stuff, but what have you seen with Mel Gibson in it lately? Right? And why did that happen? Because he drank too much. And he said things he ought not to say, and maybe things that he didn't mean or didn't really think. But sometimes when you're drunk and you're all your guards down, you say things you shouldn't say and say things that you wouldn't ordinarily say. So that's the Old Testament, okay, so we got a couple of verses there, but we've also got some New Testament verses that we should look at about drunkenness, about drinking too much, and one of those is 1 Peter 4:3. It says, "For the time already past is sufficient for you to have carried out the desire of the Gentiles." I want you to remember that word, Gentiles. "Having pursued a course of sensuality, lust, drunkenness, carousing, drinking parties, and abominable idolatries." Oof. Okay, sounds bad. Ephesians 5:18, he says, "And do not get drunk with wine, for that is dissipation, but be filled with the Spirit." Dissipation is like anarchy or madness, you know, basically. So these two passages are from Peter, the first one, and then Paul. And they both say that becoming drunk is a sin. Right? They both are saying it's in the list of sins, all the bad things that you could do. And in all those lists where they list off all of the bad things and all the sins, you know, in all of Paul's letters, he's usually got drunkenness in there. So it's most definitely a sin. And the reason why I asked you to think about Gentiles is because some Bibles translate that as the word pagan. So pagan rituals, right? So where did they convert all these pagans, right? They've converted Gentile pagans into Christians, right? So what was their experience with wine? It wasn't good. It wasn't good. They treated wine as maybe a lubricant in order to do things that they shouldn't do, right? So you have something holding you back. You have inhibitions from doing something that's completely disgusting and gross and vile. And you're like, you know what, if I drink enough, then it'll be okay. So they had these things called bacchanalias, I guess, and it's a drinking party, and then they'd have these huge, well, you know, lots of partners, we'll just say that. And they would hire extra partners from the local temple down the street, and they would have a hole in the ground, a big hole like a well, and they would eat so much and drink so much that they would just like puke their brains out, and then they drink more so they could puke some more into a hole in the ground. It's kind of gross, right? But that would be a festival that was honoring the god of wine, Bacchus. So there you go. So that was a religious thing, but completely gross, right? So completely gross. So if you're brought up with wine being this completely gross and disgusting thing that is like everything that's bad, right? Look at what he says, right? Pursuit, of course, is sensuality, lust, drunkenness, carousing, drinking parties, and abominable idolatries. That's all the things, right? What I just told you, that's all those things in one party, right? One big party. So that is something you have to take into account. You know, your experience with drinking, if you start drinking again, or if that's your relationship to wine, I mean, people that go to like AA and stuff, right? They don't say you can just have one here and there, and it's cool, right? They tell you not to drink anymore. Because if you do, what's going to happen? You're going to fall right back over where you were before. So you have all these pagan Gentiles that were involved in all this gross, nasty sin, and the fuel or the lubricant for that sin to make it easier was the alcohol, this wine. It made it easier for them to do all these sins. They didn't care, right? So, of course they're going to say, don't do that, right? And the same thing happens, you know, to teenagers these days. I'll tell you, there is a lot of bad things going on with teenagers and on college campuses. They're having bacchanalias. The only thing is they're not worshiping the God of wine, but they're doing all the other things. And when you think about alcohol in that context, that it's a vehicle to do something horrible or to do something bad, then alcohol in itself is bad. You have to think about it like that, right? Alcohol is used for a purpose of doing evil, so that makes it evil, right? Even though it in and of itself is not necessarily bad, because we read that earlier, but if you're using it to do bad things, then obviously it's bad. And here's another one, something that people in the ancient world didn't have, that we have today, is 2 or 3 ton metal objects that go 100 miles an hour, right? They might get in a fight and punch someone's lights out, but they're not going to hit somebody with their car and kill them. And that's it. That's all done. Or hit a bus full of kids or something like that because they drank a little too much. So you got to think about it. Is it worth it? Is it okay? I mean, you know, something else too, like that you got to remember is all your old drinking buddies and everybody that will be mad at you for stopping, right? Those are these Gentiles too, right? I just wanted to throw that one up there because they'll want you to keep drinking. It says, in all this, they are surprised that you do not run with them into the same excesses of dissipation, and they malign you. So they say bad things. And I remember for a while when I was a construction worker, you know, people would think that you're weird if you didn't go to the bars and do all the things, you know. And then I remember even before that, my dad had some friends from before he was a Christian, and when he converted to Christianity, they were like, you know, you're no fun. You're no fun anymore. I don't want to hang out with you because you don't drink anymore, you know. But is that what alcohol's supposed to be for? Is that what it's for, really? Is it really supposed to be okay to get wasted? No, it's not. Drinking to excess, or drinking when it starts to even, you know, change the way you thought about, change the way you think about things, is bad. It's hard to explain, but it's like, when have you drank too much? When is too much, you know? You think about the Jews, they watered it down, they put all this water in with theirs. They could drink a lot more before it even did anything to them. It would just be like a flavoring to their water. You know, you think about it, it's like a lot of water in there. It's probably like 2% alcohol, 2 or 3%. You go down to the store, you buy wine, and it's 9 to 13 or more even, or it could be like 15 to 18. I think I've seen that on a bottle before. That's a lot. You know, you have one glass of wine at 18%, and you're probably going to feel that, especially if you don't drink all the time. So is it wrong? Alcohol, is it wrong? Is it a sin to drink something? Well, it's probably not, but is it advisable? Is it a good thing? If you get drunk, you know it's wrong. So when is that line crossed? Do you really want to play with that? Is it, I don't know, is it always, you know, you don't want to play with getting as close to the line as possible before you go over it, right? Oh, just play with that line. You know, that's not what Christianity is about, is it? I think Jesus calls us to do the best thing that we can do, not playing against the thing that's the least bad. You know what? Is that a sin? Is that a sin? I used to do that a lot when I was younger. It's like, oh, it's not really a sin, but we shouldn't be looking for that. We should be looking for the best thing. So it's just something we got to think about, right? Something we got to think about if it's really worth it. Is it really okay? And I think that's something that we have to answer for ourselves. I think that's really something we have, we get the information, we ingest the information, we think about it, and we say, you know what, I feel okay with it, right? So anyway, that's my understanding of what the scripture teaches on alcohol anyhow. It is hard to live back then because, our alcohol is just not the same as theirs. It's way stronger. So that's something, it's just definitely a thing. Anyway, I guess I'm going to offer an invitation. If even though we were talking about alcohol all day, or all while I was up here, I still want to just offer one anyhow, because we always do. And it just gives people an opportunity, even if they're out there on the internet and they're watching right now, they might want to really think about what they're doing with their life, Do they believe in Jesus Christ? And have they been just sitting on their hands and not thinking about, what am I going to do with this belief that I have? Am I willing to accept Jesus as my Lord and my Savior? Am I willing to repent of my sins, change my heart and my mind? Am I willing to be baptized? Is that something that you want to do, to commit yourself to Jesus? Because that is the path to salvation. That is how we find eternal life. That promise is for everybody out there, no matter who they are. So if that call has reached you today, I want to call on you to come forward as we stand and we sing.